Kia ora koutou katoa, ko John Reid tōku ingoa. Welcome to this edition of Water New Zealand's podcast series, Tāwara o Te Wai. I'm John Reid from Water New Zealand. Today, Emily Afoa and Phil Duncan are joining us as guests to share their perspectives on Indigenous values and water from both sides of the Tasman. And as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, Hannah Edmond. Kia ora, Emily and Phil.
Kia ora.
Yama John, Yama Hannah, Yama Emily.
Before we start, we wanted to let everyone know that Hannah will be taking a break from podcasting to start her parenting journey from September. So huge congratulations to Hannah and welcome to Emily, who will be co-hosting the podcast going forwards. Hannah, over to you to start.
Thanks, John, and kia ora, Emily and Phil. Welcome to Tāwara o Te Wai. Can we start off, I guess, with the most important part of you guys introducing yourselves and a bit of background around who you are, where you've come from, and your journey to being part of the water industry. Maybe, Emily, you could start off.
Kia ora, well, tēnā koutou. I'm thrilled to be here and congratulations, Hannah, here. I'm looking forward to your next journey as well and stepping into that role. But ai ko waio, here tēnei no Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Maniapoto no ki, ko Emily Afoa ahau. I'm Emily. I'm an environmental engineer by training, but working in the water sector. Water wai is my passion. And that's come about right from when I was first at university. Went into an environmental engineering degree with a conjoint arts degree where I majored in physical geography. So I really enjoyed the tension of understanding our natural world and then the problem solving approach that comes through engineering. And right from the early days got introduced to nature-based solutions, water-sensitive design, low-impact design as it was then, but essentially alternate ways of working with water. And that was where I also connected with expressing Māori values in the way I practice as a professional and stepping into that journey personally as well. So learning mai reo, understanding more on tikanga, on mātauranga Māori, and bringing both personal and professional worlds together, which isn't necessarily how you start off your career.
Yama Phil Naya, Niwara, Gomeroi Māori. That's hello, my name's Phil. My traditional name is Niwara, the next one, as I'm the oldest of 127 grandchildren. And I'm a very proud Gomeroi man, Māori is man. My journey in water started many, many years ago as a young man, growing up on the Guaira and Mihai rivers and also the McIntyre and Barwon and the Namoy. I've got a lived experience about watching the changing rural sector and the impacts on country, particularly our arteries and veins, which people call rivers and anabranches, and the impacts on our native fish populations, our native vegetation, and, you know, the flow-on impact on people and community. My cultural knowledge has been handed down transgenerationally, as with my whānau in Aotearoa. So we talk in the mirrors and learn through mirrors in life. But my grandfather, and I come from a matrilineal line, so women's knowledge is so important. I've been entrusted with that. I'm not an academic per se. It took me 42 years to get my honorary doctorate. So I took the long road, but that journey has been one of collaboration, mentoring, and success from people who have seen something in me many years ago and that have nurtured me to land where I am today, which is this magnificent opportunity, like we're doing with this podcast, to share our knowledge, to create a greater curiosity within water leadership and decision makers on how we can interweave our cultural values, knowledge, perspectives, and methodologies into future strategies and plans to protect this magical resource I call Gali, which is water, for the future of our next generations, and leave them with the most sustainable and resilient environment and you know, cultural values and cultural sites of significance for them to take up the mantle for future management. And I'm so appreciative of this wonderful opportunity. So in my language, it's Marabu. Huge Marabu to you, my whānau in Aotearoa.
Got it. And it's so fantastic to hear the passion in both of you for this real topic. So I'm quite excited to get stuck into the conversation.
Yeah, kia ora, both of you. Where did you both get your cultural teachings from? So Emily, you mentioned you started to talk about your sort of journey through and after university, but where did you learn? It'd be useful to hear a little bit more about that before we go on.
Oh, it's interesting. I was reflecting on Phil's kōrero because I've almost come through the opposite pathway. I started off in academia, and that's where I had my first introduction, particularly through SPIRES, which is the South Pacific Indigenous Engineering students within the Faculty of Engineering. So it's representing Māori and Pacifica students within the engineering faculty, and Dr. Kipper Morgan was one of the lecturers there who encouraged me to lean into my Māoritanga. The short version is I've grown up disconnected from my culture. I'm embracing it as an adult. So I actually started in that academic space, firstly through nature-based solutions and a natural affinity to taiao. And then as I started doing kurapo, doing night school, learning my reo, connecting with other professionals and Māori in the sector, I realised that natural tendency I had for wai and for taiao, for our waters and our environments, had this really solid foundation in tikanga, mātauranga, things that gave me grounding. Like many of us, I'm wearing multiple hats. I'm sitting in with a strong focus in my mahi in the water sector, but now also stepping into a bit of a research space with Pūrangakura, a Kaupapa Māori independent research centre, and just I could sit there as a sponge all day listening to the kōrero that's shared and seeing people on the ground. That's where I've been coming from, this academic and mahi space, now feeling like I'm connecting into purpose on the ground, and that's what's really thrilling. But at this point, what I'm searching towards or moving towards as to how I can get those cultural teachings from my own whenua, and I'm not there yet. So that's why I think sometimes I'm coming about it in the reverse.
It's a brave space to be in, and thank you really for sharing that, Emily. And then Phil, on the other hand, you've started us off with the story. Do you want to share a bit more about where you've learnt?
Oh, Hannah, Marabu, Hannah, thank you. Look, there are some words that Emily and some positions that Emily has given us from a very personal perspective that reaffirms my belief that as Indigenous people globally, we talk in the mirrors, we live in mirrors, and the journeys are not dissimilar. So what my teachings, I was born in Māori, New South Wales, Northwest Slopes and Plains, the son of a stolen woman and a shearer. My knowledge has been handed down to me by my grandfather, my father, but there are a great amount of teachings in that process and that journey that come from my women, my grandmother, my mother, and currently my wife, who is a saltwater woman, and I'll explain that. Because my knowledge is just not about the freshwater estates. I've had the wonderful opportunity to learn from some of the most amazing knowledge holders about the marine estates, the rainforest and desert country. So as a young man coming from a really political, a town that had a lot of political focus, a lot of racial disharmony, I was encouraged to get out. And rugby league was my segue out of apparently I could play the game all right. So I ended up leaving Māori to go on that journey. But before I left, those formative years right up until I was 19 was spent traversing my country with my grandfather, my aunties, and the investment that they, the knowledge that they have invested in me has held me strong professionally, but more importantly, personally around my identity on who I am and my place of belonging. So that my identity is interwoven, I don't talk about in isolation of my cultural values and my place of belonging. But I've got to acknowledge the women in my life that have the generosity of spirit, Emily, that we as Indigenous people globally, we keep bringing to the table. We come with our songs, our dance, our knowledge, and it's a gift we keep giving. I've always was told, have people accept you for who you are, an Aboriginal person living in the modern world. I don't leave my indigeneity at the door no matter where I go, even on holidays. It goes with me. But I have had a blessed life being taught what's right and wrong. But one of the key values is don't do it in isolation. of our greatest allies and champions. And I think this podcast is the perfect platform for me to reaffirm that together we can make a difference, both Indigenous globally, but taking our non-Indigenous allies and champions on the journey, not leaving them behind on the platform of two-way knowledge exchanges. We can't do it by ourselves, and therefore always leave the door open. My soul sings, and I go home and sit under that tree besides the Taikana Creek to replenish my cultural soul and reaffirm my cultural commitment to being the best I can be for my people.
Phil, I'm really interested in the phrase caring for country in Australia, and I guess how you see that and what it means to you and how you apply it in the work that you do. I know that Emily, you've probably got quite a bit that will draw parallels with Aotearoa and the Māori culture as well. So it would be great to hear your perspectives on that as we kind of journey through Phil's views.
Hannah, that's a really good question to ask me, because we belong to country. We don't own country. We don't have this value of country as an asset. We use country as an ally, a living, breathing entity that has sustained us in Australia on the driest inhabited continent on this planet since time immemorial. I don't use 60,000, 65. I use since day dot, so since time immemorial. And to be able to give back to country is always, we have interacted with country in the most symbiotic and respectful and sustainable manner from my teachings, and I currently still do that, walking softly on country. You know, we are sustainable fisher people, not trophy fisher people. We manage our traditional vegetation that has medicinal values in the most culturally appropriate manner, because when we're sick, we need to be able to look at our traditional medicines where Western medicines sometimes may fail. I use this analogy of the circle of life out of a wonderful movie that I watch many times with my grandchildren, The Lion King, the circle of life. You know, and it's from where we step on country softly first, and what we do in that cycle of life is how we leave a stronger platform for our next generation, our younger ones, to step up and add their pillars of strength to that platform and keep driving forward and making the journey their own. But the key message in that is, don't you dare leave our allies and our champions, the non-Indigenous people that want to share the load and share the journey. We leave no one behind. Yeah, so caring for country it's not an obligation. It's inbuilt in us from cradle to grave, if I may use those terms.
Which feels really connected with the water cycle and the culture, and thinking about the whole industry of water as one water rather than many different types of water. But Emily, maybe do you want to reflect from your perspective on how you see it?
Yeah, I was having the same thought. I was linking that circle of life with our water cycle, te hurihanga wai, one water, that it's all interconnected, irrespective of whether it's temporarily in a pipe. But I was reflecting in your kōrero, Phil. I think it's a theme across many of our international Indigenous peers, reframing positionality of ourselves as people in relation to our environment, to our waters, that we're the taina, the younger sibling. We're at essentially the bottom of the pecking order, rather than the way I just think a lot of the way we have been operating in many of our professions and in our current social constructs has been human as dominant. We will modify, we will change to suit our purposes. But I think more and more now, our taiao is talking back, reminding ourselves of our position, that we need to have respect for waters, for environment, for all of our waters as well in that connected whole. And so what I find exciting, I have optimism for, is the future, because when we're talking about everyone coming along together, irrespective of where we come from or where we live, It's the reframing already of, say, regenerative practices. They align strongly with this idea of recognizing the circle of life, of recognizing the water cycle, of thinking forward from extractive processes to regenerative systems. So I'm really excited to see increased valuing of Indigenous knowledges, of Indigenous ways of knowing and being that already align with a number of practices that are now seeing their heyday in looking towards reduction, reuse, these terms that we've heard before. So I think in caring for country, it's the same, that our tohu whenua, our landmarks, our waters, our mountains, our seas, they're all tupuna, they're our ancestors. We see them as part of our whānau. And one reflection I've had, in many cultures, we personify Mother Earth. We look to her as our nurturer. And so if we say papa toa nuku, Phil, you'll have your own kupu for that respect for whenua, but we just extend it. Our rivers are our ancestors, our maunga are our ancestors, and then as that collective whole, we've got papa toa nuku, our earth mother.
We are connected, and water does connect us, and water should unite us, not just Indigenous, but from a global and passion perspective. I'm going to be brave, and because I was told that our artesian hot waterways connects us with our whānau in Aotearoa and to our Indigenous Indonesian brothers and sisters. So in this new ideologies of systems thinking, we as Indigenous people, we think spatially, we think temporally, we think about our cultural responsibility where we are in that system. We think about the people or the clans and the mob, as I won't use the word mob, but we think about our communities upstream. We think about where we are, but we think about that cultural obligation of making sure gali or water gets to the people downstream. So I'm going to be bold, and I probably will get corrected, but I believe that our artesian waterways do unite us. And I want to add that, my twin town, where I come from Māori, New South Wales, my twin town in Aotearoa is Te Amutu.
In the mighty Waikato. That's really nice, sort of thinking about how we can try and link some of that thinking into some of the bigger sort of global challenges that many of our communities are facing. So how do we start to try and apply some of that knowledge to help solve some of those problems and take us forwards instead of backwards?
Emily, ladies first, you've heard me say this before. I would ask you to take the lead on this, and I will try to add value, please.
What's in that, queer? I'm going to start with, I think, what's quite a basic thought, but foundational to all, and I've been learning more and more on this value of relationships. I think in this day and age, quite a few of us working in water spaces, and also as Indigenous practitioners, we wear many hats, we're spread quite thin. And so it's the relationships, the whakawhanaungatanga, the connection through both my Tektus work hat and my Pūrangakura research hat. The more and more we connect, you hear people doing similar mahi, and that exchange of ideas is how we can collectivize, to not be sitting in isolation, all trying to do the same work at the same time, when finances to do work, time to do work, and the kind of need for action are all in tension with one another. So I really think building relationships and having the time for knowledge exchange, it also sparks innovation, because you can get caught in your own hamster wheel of what you know or what you think you know, and you have one little spark from a korero, for example, between ourselves right here, to go, oh, you're doing that over there, I'm doing this over here, I wonder if we can complement one another and do something even greater together. And what is a real challenge is that competition, commerciality. I think when we're looking with taiao, when we're working with taiao and why, there's a time for business hats and there's a time for caring for country, for looking after papa toa nuku. And so that's one of my internal tensions that I'm often battling. because you know there's amazing work going on somewhere else. Oh, but it's in someone else's project. How can we do that knowledge exchange? And that's the relational aspect of the networks that we build, where you can step above the nature of competition. Because obviously I'm still, I still wear a consultant hat too, and to keep us all fed and pay our mortgages and keep our whānau healthy, we all need to make money. But beyond that, I think it's how we look to share knowledge and looking to our Indigenous knowledge systems. Some of it is just a refresher of those kōrero tuku iho, that knowledge that's been passed down and perhaps has been pushed aside for other knowledge forms, peer-reviewed journals, the academy. I think it's finding equity in our knowledge systems, and part of that is only enhanced through relationships. When you're talking to kaumātua, koia, tohunga experts in their field who know the stories from lived experience, you can't doubt its validity. But if someone hasn't experienced that place of story listening, of understanding the meanings, sometimes the depth of it is hidden in what can be seen as myths and legends. It's that real relational aspect that I've been finding so much growth and joy and depth in, just sitting and being present and being able to share what I have as well. It's a conversations and dialogue go in both directions.
Oh, look, my Buri, that prompted me. I've got my mind's doing 10 to the dozen. So I'm going to try and restructure it, try and channel it to structure it. What we need to amplify is the value of our networks and the knowledge within those network systems, because we have this unique moment in time to cradle our Indigenous knowledge and values, perspectives and methodologies and bring two knowledge systems together. The Western science and the what I call cultural science are not combative. In actual fact, they can complement one another. And yes, we are in the world that we exist as consultants. Time is money. But you know what? Emeritus Professor Cynthia Mitchell, sometimes we've got to slow down to speed up. And that slowing down means let's sit down and have a cup of tea around that campfire. Let's sit on that riverbank and let's just coalesce and just talk about how that is value. You cannot put a dollar value on knowledge. I believe that we are in a unique moment in time where we've got some of our key decision makers and leaders within the agency that now understand how important it is to walk and talk together, leaving no one behind, and bringing these two knowledge systems together. It's not going to be easy, but patience and understanding of the two words I want to amplify. From our decision makers, just trust us that we know what we're doing. If you are driven by time, you're going to fail. You will fail our people. We will fail our projects because we will have gaps. And we need to leave no stone unturned to make sure that we are successful together. I also think that there is a wonderful opportunity to amplify the cultural values of our agency. And, amplify that we are being the best we can be together, because, in my vision, I want us to be the preferred proponent that people come to do the work, because I can draw on knowledge from Aotearoa. Valuing our cultural diversity is another value. Not just, we have many people from around the world that work in agency. So I also believe that we need to invest in the opportunity to unpack that cultural diversity, because what may work in another country, what has worked in another country, can work with us as well by customizing our approach to it. But the fundamental values of cultural knowledge, respect, and position never change. John and Hannah, you are in this space with us. We would not be having this talk. You are an ally. we need to make sure that we are nurturing your confidence, creating the curiosity to learn more, so that you can be the best you can be for yourself and therefore us. So, we get it that in Australia, we've got a whole range of non-Indigenous people that are scared of asking the wrong question, saying the wrong thing. So I'll finish up with this. I believe that what we are, just for this part, I believe that we are creating this safe environment where we all have courageous conversations. And sometimes listening, and the loudest thing you hear is the heart beating in your chest.
I've been there.
Relate to that. Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm just really wanting to say that we are together, and we've got to keep. Sorry, I'm getting really animated, but it's the passion that we all have. How do we take you with us, leaving no one behind?
And I think what's really interesting for me reflecting is like so many of us, particularly in the water industry, are so passionate about the reason that we're in it. We're not in it because we like doing calculations and sitting in a corner and pouring more concrete. We like it because we're really passionate about the environment and making, water more accessible to our people and our country. And so I think there's an incredible energy when you guys are talking that I can pick up on, that I'm like, oh yeah, you're reigniting that fire, certainly within me. And another thing I was reflecting on, and John and I have had a couple of podcasts over the last year. One was with Chris Thurston and Amanda Lake around collaboration globally, and the fact that actually sometimes, especially with these increased global challenges, we actually need to be collaborating not on a business making lots of money perspective, but on a who are the right people from around the world and who's got that knowledge that we can share. And actually those sparks, as you were talking about, Emily, where you spark off that conversation, you go, oh, actually that connects with that thing from last week. I think it's fantastic reflection.
Can I give an example of this collaboration?
Absolutely.
In April this year, a few years ago, I set up an on-country classroom on my river called the Guaira, and it's called Winangali Ganamagali. Listen, learn, understand from our sacred Mother Earth about our water. And this year, I had our CEO, Amelia Lindsay, and my equivalent Troy Brackbank come over to do that. And at the same time, through that collaboration and networking, we had the people from the Whanganui join my alumni at Griffith, Professor David Hamilton. So I said, bring them down too. We had this amazing collaboration night where I had one of our knowledge holders, Jason Wilson, talk about the constellations and talked about the Milky Way and the Dinawan, the Emu, my mother that lives in there, and the Southern Cross. And then I'm getting, this is goosebumpy. Yeah. And then Troy took over the mic, so to speak, and was pointing to the same stars, talking about the Waka. This is collaboration.
And I think you've probably answered the next question that I had on my mind, but around the global part of these challenges, because we've talked about lots, there being lots of big challenges around the world, but that global aspect is quite important. And I think you've already both touched on the fact that actually there's huge opportunity for sharing and exchanging that knowledge. But do you think there are any particular examples of things that we maybe should be focusing on in terms of sharing that knowledge, or any particular routes we should be focusing on?
Globally, we face the same challenges: quality of life, longevity of life, and a quality cultural way of life. And those three principles cascade out of all Indigenous communities. So those are the three pillars that unite us. And water being, and our cultures being so fluid and dynamic, for me, it's the missing piece of knowledge on how we can mitigate and how we can future-proof this country, this world, against the challenges of climate. But we can't do it in isolation of one another. And I'm going to be bold and say our agency has a unique opportunity to take a significant lead.
I'm perhaps not thinking quite as blue sky, because that's really, again, all the sparks. I'm excited by that thought and the knowledge sharing that can come with it. And I think even at a basic level, hearing the experiences of others, how did they get Indigenous voices to the decision-making table? What were examples where they could show valuing of Indigenous knowledge systems alongside conventional science, supported by technology, that the real power in storytelling as well, that is so often a strength of Indigenous peoples with oral histories. That's what wins over the hearts and minds of naysayers sometimes. If I choose to be so bold, you can tell a good story and then people can connect with it. Again, it's that strength of connection and understanding what makes people, what sparks joy in them, and then through storytelling find those connections and then learn how to elevate the right people into the decision making or design tables, because that's quite often one of the remaining challenges. There's a desire to recognise, say, Mātauranga Māori or Indigenous knowledge systems, but then not quite bring the right people all the way into the whare to help with the design, to make the ultimate decisions. And so I think from a global aspect, there's been some amazing projects undertaken. The one that comes to mind most recently was on the Klamath and the removal of old hydroelectric dams to restore the flow of the Awa and the fisheries within. It's not my story to tell, so I don't want to do it an injustice, but that was an amazing example of work done internationally that shows the power of diligence and the voices and the pathways that they took that perhaps others can learn from.
Those stories, we might not have a written English language, but those stories, our connections interwoven into our song, art, dance, and the storytellings about the observational and interactive way we've lived with country. Storytelling is part of our DNA. And the ability to corral people that are interested in those stories is the start of their journey, and it's how we walk with them, not leaving them behind and unlocking that champion or that ally. That's part of the storytelling. Then their story starts taking over and they start telling their story to their next generation. Might be not Indigenous, but it's storytelling. I don't want them to say, I met Uncle Phil or I met Emily. I want them to say, I've met all these amazing Indigenous people, both in Australia and whānau from Aotearoa, and this is what I'm learning. So hopefully this podcast is igniting an insatiable appetite for us to continue this.
This conversation has been really cup-filling. It's nothing like sparking that joy and reminding us why we do this mahi. It's more than mahi, that's the thing. It's our passion, all of us. You can tell when we get too excited and start talking over the top of one another. Tēnā te mihi, tēnā te mihi, tēnā te mihi.
Wow, well, that was quite a podcast today. I love the idea of Western science and Indigenous knowledge sort of interlinking and combining to build something more strong, and also how we can tell more stories. Maybe we should come back in a few months' time with some other stories. First off, thank you very much, Emily and Phil, for joining Hannah and myself today. Amazing, really, to hear your perspectives and the opportunities we have for learning from Indigenous cultures, as well as collaboration across borders. If you're as inspired as we are from listening to Emily and Phil, they'll be both at the Water New Zealand conference in September, and Phil is also presenting at the 2025 joint conference of the New Zealand and Australian Freshwater Science Societies, which is also in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, in early December. Finally, thank you for listening to this latest episode. We'll be back next month with our next podcast.